This morning in North Carolina, wheels are spinning. Determination is winning. A passion is now a thriving business, and it shows no signs of slowing down. How? The power of a conversation, like the one Clint Spiegel had with First Horizon Bank about starting a bike wheel manufacturing facility in Asheville. Now it's not just talk, it's rubber meets road. First Horizon Bank. Let's find a way. Go to firsthorizon.com/Clint. First Horizon Bank, member FDIC.
This is an Extra 106.3 podcast. To hear more live and local content like this, tune into 106.3 FM or download the Extra 106.3 app. Extra 106.3 and a Second Chance Bail Bonds are here to back your blue. Back Your Blue highlights special initiatives, criminal justice programs, and community events aimed at keeping our communities safer. Join a Second Chance Bail Bond CEO Daniel Matalon and host Tug Coward to learn some good news about and from the law enforcement and justice communities. Now it's time to Back Your Blue on Extra 106.3 FM and the Extra 106.3 app.
Welcome to Back Your Blue with Daniel Matalon, the CEO of A Second Chance Bail Bonds and A Second Chance Monitoring. My name is Tug Cowart. This guest is doing something that caught his attention in the minute, right. I guess it caught his attention right as we got started. When I was telling him, hey, can we get a little mic check out of you? We're going to check 1, 2, 3, check 1, 2, 3. And he's like, wait. I don't think I've ever been on this end of the conversation before. We're talking to GBI Gang Task Force Special Agent in Charge, Ken Howard. Ken, how are you, bud?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. What was it about just doing the mic check that put you into mode like you were at the office already?
Well, it was a combination of the seating arrangement here at the table and then the I guess the technical engineer over my shoulder in another room looking through the two-way
one-sided glass.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love it. Born and raised in Jessup, Georgia, graduated from the University of Georgia. How about them dogs, kid?
Yes, sir. Shout out to my Wayne County Yellow Jackets and my Georgia Bulldogs.
There you go.
Go Dogs.
There you go. Shook 'em. Braves fan too?
Yes, sir.
All right, that's
100.
cool. Yeah, I'm telling you what, this is like coming to Disney World sometimes. Coming here,
it is. I was really enjoying just sitting in the room out there while I was waiting and listening to that environment, and sound like a fun working environment.
Yeah, man,
there.
it ain't real bad. Now, you began working in law enforcement in 1995, working for Brunswick, Georgia Police Department as an officer. Worked a lot of years there as an undercover agent, infiltrating drug trafficking organizations. Spent the majority of your career targeting violent gangs and organized criminal networks. And now a special agent in charge and the architect of GBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation's statewide gang task force. Agent Howard is recognized as a subject matter expert in law enforcement disciplines, including gangs and organized crime. And goodness gracious, that sounds like a heavy, heavy topic to be working with for as long as you have.
It does. As I sit here and listen to you talk about it, it seems surreal that all of that is true. You're absolutely right. It can be a heavy topic. Unfortunately for us on my side, it's just our norm. And so, believe it or not, right or wrong, it kind of becomes just what you do.
Yeah, goodness. Daniel, is this something that you've dealt with at A Second Chance? I mean, are there people that have come through that need bond and they happen to be in a gang?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah, oh my God!
All the time.
See,
and it's the risk factor obviously is, you have to like cut through a lot of the whatever evidence we can get our hands on. So we don't have the privilege of having all the information that they have, right? Because they've built the case or helped build the case and worked through a lot of the stuff. We're assessing the risk of, hey, how much of a risk is this person? And yes, gangs are definitely a huge part of, unfortunately, what we do.
Goodness. So how'd you get started in this line of work? Did you always want to be a police officer as a young man growing up, or is it something that opportunity came up and you took it, or how did that all play out?
Well, as a young boy growing up in Jessup, Georgia, like a lot of other kids my age, I enjoyed playing cops and robbers outside and military games,
hunting
war
and
games in the
things.
woods, and hunting and fishing. And somewhere along the way, my best friend growing up, Derek Ellis, his uncle Guy Ellis was a GBI agent, and of course I had some interactions with Mr. Ellis growing up, and was just really impressed with his professionalism and the way he carried himself and some of the stories he told about working for the GBI. So when I did my internship, when I was at the University of Georgia, I did an internship with the what was then the Atlanta Regional Drug Enforcement Office, and I mean that was it. I mean that was like, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Oh wow!
It was high speed, low drag, just getting after it, and great group of crime fighters, and I really enjoyed that internship and said I got to do this.
Take me back to Brunswick, Georgia.
Yeah.
What was it like going to work down there, and what do you feel like that you took away from your first job in law enforcement?
Well, man, the first 6 months as a police officer are a blur. I probably spent the first 6 months in shock, to be honest with you.
Why?
Just coming, from a different environment where, having very limited interactions with law enforcement at least of a negative type growing up. Being raised by very, I guess, traditional family values where you respect your elders and you respect law enforcement, you respect people in uniform. Going from that to an environment where there was a high crime rate and there was a lack of respect for order and law in certain areas and by certain people, it was just shocking to me. And then just the amount of brutality that people would visit on their fellow human beings. Just the way they would take advantage of one another, and it's criminals I'm talking about. It's hard for a young man and probably a young woman to wrap their mind around initially.
Do you feel like we're back in that same place where you started back in Brunswick? Because it seems like that when I look at the news at night.
Well, the statistics would support an increase in crime rate for sure. I think if you look at the statistics nationwide, Georgia, fortunately, ranks in the middle of the pack as far as violent crime rates go. But the rates are still about 12.5 to 13% higher than they were in 2019. Now, that's maybe a different conversation for, all the causes or speculations about 2019 to 2024. But those are the facts. That's the data. And so what you feel is accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, do you care to talk about that? Because I think that's something, Daniel, I'm sure you've seen an increase in your business just because of the changes that we've experienced in Atlanta and Metro Atlanta and Georgia with crime rates going up. Because, as Ken said, your eyes are not lying to you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we've tracked statistics for us since 2007 here in Georgia, which is when I got started in the industry. So we've 17 going on 18 years. So yeah, we've seen the spike and the trends that come with all that.
So what is it, do you think, that's causing it, Ken? Because I think if we don't answer that question, I don't know that we accomplish the goal today of telling why it's so important that people like you are in our communities and people like Daniel are running businesses that support our communities. Why do you think it is? Like, what is it that has put Georgia in the situation that we find ourselves in, middle of the pack, but with an increased percentage of crime?
Well, it's a couple of different factors. One, not the least of which, is weak leadership, weak policymakers. When you have organized crime, and criminal street gangs are organized crime groups, capitalize on weak policy, weak enforcement, weak decision making. They fill those vacuums where there's a lack of strong leadership. They thrive on that. It's like blood in the water to a shark. And so that's one of the contributing factors. And so in certain jurisdictions around the state of Georgia, that's what we have. Talking about certain municipalities, counties. So you take that and then you pour that 2019 to 2024 movement, for lack of a better description, of anti-cops, anti-police. The police are the problem, not the criminals. That was a death knell, for lack of a better term, for enforcement in these communities. The vast majority of police officers, statistics will bear this out, and anecdotally I can assure you this is the case, are great human beings who got in this profession because they believe in the mission and they want to serve their fellow communities and their fellow people. They believe in the Batman hero, put on a cape and help people that I was talking about earlier when I talked about growing up as a little boy. You want to be a hero. You want to help people, and that's what most of them believe in. So then when you start trashing the profession and dumping on the profession, and then those weak policymakers and politicians start capitalizing on that movement and prosecuting officers and removing certain protections from officers, then the natural reaction is the officers are going to pull back. They're not going to proactively police and enforce in certain communities for fear and lack of retaliation by those decision makers. And a lot of them are going to leave, and we saw that. We saw a tremendous, just a mass exodus nationwide with experienced law enforcement officers. So then you create this large gap in that experience, and this younger generation of officers, they don't have that guidance and leadership right next to them on these difficult calls. And so it exacerbates the problem. It just keeps feeding the problem. So those are a couple of the issues. And ultimately, too, I don't think we should sleep on the fact that the pandemic relief bill or a pandemic relief fund, whatever you want to call it, that came out of Washington during the pandemic that summer was a boon for organized crime.
Just with the free money being sent out.
Free money, yeah. It was just raining money all over the nation. And our gangs, our organized crimes were very quick to seize on those funds and divert billions of dollars from the taxpayers, not millions, billions.
Wow.
We will never recover that money. We'll never be able to account for that money. And the main problem with that funding and that policy or that decision is that there were very little to no controls over who got the money and if their reasoning for obtaining the money was legit. And so when you pour millions and then billions of dollars into organized crime, it creates all kind of other problems because one organization sees that this organization is now flush with cash. You think they sit back and they just applaud them for their criminal successes.
Right. Hey,
no,
nice work.
They want that money. So the home invasions ramp up, the murders ramp up, the robberies ramp up, and the infighting between these groups. So it's a cascading problem. Goodness
gracious. I want to get into some of that. I want to get into community support, people coming back to the profession maybe, hopefully. And I want to talk about what you did after you left Brunswick, because when we left there, you were a regular everyday officer, but then were an undercover agent infiltrating some of these gangs and organizations. So I want to hear about that too, just because it's such a fascinating story. And goodness gracious, we salute your service to your community as we talk to GBI Gang Task Force Special Agent in Charge, Ken Howard, here on Back Your Blue on Extra 106.3.
Are you planning a fall wedding? With a venue to book, cakes to taste, and decorations to pick, the expenses can stack up. This month, D. Geller & Son is taking one expense off your plate: the rings. How? For the month of August, D. Geller & Son is offering 0% APR financing for 5 years. Find the perfect match to her engagement ring or dream up something totally one of a kind. Surprise her with something that will take her breath away on your wedding day. And just the same, get 60 months to pay with no interest. Only at D. Geller & Son in Atlanta, Kennesaw, and Sandy Springs, and online at dgeller.com.
A lifetime of hard work, children laughing in the kitchen, family photos on a restaurant wall, a legacy that lives on. It all comes from the power of a conversation, like the one Tommy Hall had with First Horizon Bank about taking over his father's Charleston-based restaurant business. Now the table is set for a whole new generation. First Horizon Bank. Let's find a way. Go to firsthorizon.com/Tommy. First Horizon Bank, member FDIC.
This is Back Your Blue, presented by A Second Chance Bail Bonds, live on Extra 106.3 FM and streaming for free anytime on the Extra 106.3 app.
Welcome back to Back Your Blue with Daniel Madelon, the CEO of A Second Chance Bail Bonds and A Second Chance Monitoring. My name is Tug Cowart from the Morning Extra here on Extra 106.3. Our guest today on Back Your Blue, GBI Gang Task Force Special Agent in Charge, Ken Howard. Born and raised in Jessup, Georgia, proud grad of the University of Georgia, been working in law enforcement since 1995. So we talked about it in the last segment that you started out in Brunswick, why you started out there, and some of the experiences you had and how that first 5 years was just an absolute blur. Then you worked for many years as an undercover agent infiltrating drug trafficking organizations. And that's kind of what you touched on in the end of the last segment, just how, that profession, I guess it's a profession. I don't know what else you would call it. Illegal profession. What do you call gangs? How do you describe that in the police world?
Well, gangs are just it's organized crime. It's just, we have a different name for those particular groups. Now, there are some things that criminal street gangs do that separate themselves from your traditional organized crime groups, but they operate the same way. Look, matter of fact, many of my, if you look at the Georgia Gang Statute, you see that it's the Georgia Criminal Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. And the reasoning behind that is intentional. If you look at how a lot of these terrorist cells, or all of these terrorist cells, operate in the Middle East that we've been battling since 9/11, 2001, they all operate in identical ways to our criminal street gangs, to organized crime. They capitalize on weaker folks within their own communities. They recruit from the weak-minded or the weaker people within their own communities, and then they put them in harm's way to commit crimes of violence and crimes of fraud and theft for their benefit, and that's the benefit of the gang members and terrorists behind the scenes in the organizations, so that the frontline gang members and the frontline terrorists, or the frontline folks of organized crime, they're like cannon fodder. They're the first ones to fall. They don't even realize that ultimately they're being made victims by the people that pretend to care about them and that are pretending to recruit them and promote them for the good of this criminal street gang organization.
But isn't that what some of those people? I mean, I would imagine street gangs here in Georgia or across the country. It's young people looking for some sort of outlet, some sort of acceptance, and they find it obviously in the wrong places, and they're fed a line of bull. You're going to be brought in, you're going to be made one of the team, you're on our team, if you will, to put it in sports terms. But that's what they're looking for a lot of times when they get recruited into this, is just acceptance, right, or a place to belong.
So sometimes that's a part of it. That is a heavy recruiting tool that the criminal street gang members that are recruiters use. They certainly capitalize on that, and yes, there are young men out there that are missing that in their life, whether it's through broken homes. A lot of times, many times, it's a lack of a positive, strong male presence in the household that is one of the hugest contributors that we see to this cycle of violence. But yes, many times it's that. Other times it's just the appeal of of everything that comes with it: money, things, possessions, cars, clothes, shoes, the money to buy all those things. That's the appeal sometimes too, because I hate the old cliche, crime doesn't pay, because it's a lie.
It certainly does.
It's a lie, especially in 2024 in some of the jurisdictions I described earlier where we have this weak leadership. I'm talking nationwide. Crime absolutely pays. These folks are not being held accountable. These repeat offenders, these repeat violent offenders. So, there's no other. I was looking at the stock market situation going on earlier before I came in here. There's no other business model out there that you can get the return on your investment like you can in crime if you're willing to commit to that type of lifestyle.
Goodness. It's beyond me. I mean, again, I was raised with a intact family, and I'm not saying it has to be that way all the time, but that's the way it was for me. Mom, dad stayed married, and up until my dad passed, my wife and I have been married 23 years. I think that is really the if you want to talk about success and putting your kids in the best situation to succeed, get married, stay married, raise your family. Are there going to be bumps and bruises? Absolutely there are. But there is nothing more effective than keeping your family safe than being a family. And I'm sure you see that with the folks that come in and need your services at a Second Chance Bail Bonds and a Second Chance Monitoring, Daniel, is that a lot of times they don't have that family infrastructure.
Yeah, you see it. Obviously, we deal with all walks of life. So, I mean, you see an array of different scenarios. But, yeah, absolutely. That's definitely one of the things that stands out at times.
Yeah, I'm a faithful man, a believer. Christ is my Savior. So I have things that keep me grounded, or I feel like keep me grounded, keep my eyes on what's important, and that is my family, and making sure that my wife is taken care of, making sure my son is taken care of, and coming to work every day, working hard. And I'm probably not making nearly as much as those gangsters you're telling me about.
No, you're not.
Ain't a chance of it.
You're not.
But that's the other allure too, as you were talking about, just that fame and fortune, if you will. And I'm not saying it's fame and fortune in like Hollywood style, but it's similar, I would imagine, and they probably build a strong presence on social media promoting that lifestyle.
A lot of these guys live on social media promoting that lifestyle. Look, they're not trying to hide it. And when we support, in a lot of ways, certain segments of pop culture and as a society and as our leaders, decision makers, politicians, they support some of these antics. You look at some of the folks that have visited the White House in the last couple of years. Just go through that list and go down that list. And if you look at some of the performers, for lack of a better term, that have visited the Oval Office and been promoted from there, it leaves a lot to be desired, and I'll just leave it at that, because if you look at the message that they preach and teach on their own social media and in the music that they promote.
Just the fact that a lot of times those people are promoting this gang lifestyle on social media, and then the fact that they recruit, that using that to recruit, and then it's backed up by people in high places and politicians.
Yeah. I want to make a point there, and that's where I was headed. That's not by accident. By definition, criminal street gang members and gangs are overt. They're aggressively overt in their tactics and their violence and in their messaging, because that's part of their recruiting and that's part of their lifestyle, and it serves a couple of different purposes. People may ask, people don't understand sometimes that aren't in this business, why would they commit this murder, this drive-by shooting, this violent crime in broad daylight? And then brag about it on social media, or then brag about it in a YouTube video or music that they've put together. Well, that's part of the game. Rather than commit crime in the shadows like some other traditional criminals and keep it on the down low so that they're not discovered or interdicted by law enforcement, these folks are very brazen, very overt about it, because they know that if they come off as the most violent and dangerous of criminals, it's going to suppress communities, witnesses, eyewitness cooperation, help from communities, because they live in fear. They keep that community in which they operate and live in fear of cooperation.
Yeah, held hostage a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. So let's talk about community support for officers, because we talked about that a little bit in the first segment, how 2019 through about 2024, early 2024, it was nothing but defund the police, and now you're seeing municipalities completely backtrack on most of that. Even in California, in some of the biggest cities, they're quietly reversing course on some of that. And now, it's a good thing, but it's about 5 years too late. What about the communities that are affected the most? How is their relationship with law enforcement?
It's still difficult in a lot of places, and let's be honest, they're the communities that are impacted the most by this violent crime, because a lot of these criminals and organized criminal street gangs live and work, for lack of a better term, although it's criminal work, in those communities, or they make forays outside of those communities and then retreat to hide within those communities. So it's still difficult, because that messaging for years, and it didn't just happen in 2019, 2020.
No,
it's a message that's been building.
There, yeah.
It's been building in a certain segment of our media and our politicians for years. That was just the gas on the match that ultimately exposed a lot of it. And you're not going to turn it around in 12 months. You can't quietly start to roll those policies back. Strong leaders have to step up and front and admit, hey, we were wrong. That was a terrible idea. That was terrible messaging. We're sorry to our law enforcement partners who live and work in our communities, and we want to support them in the best way that we can and build that trust back with those communities, so that ultimately we can provide, as law enforcement officers, what those communities deserve and what they're constitutionally guaranteed, and that is protection.
And I'm not seeing that, Ken. I'm not. Have you seen that where people are taking a step back and saying we're completely wrong? It seems to me They're doing it. And Daniel, you've probably seen this too. They're quietly doing it. They're pretending that nothing happened for the last 5 years. They're pretending they didn't say defund the police. They're pretending that everything is just fine, yet quietly behind the scenes with no fanfare at all, making changes to the way that they're operating. And that's the exactly opposite of helpful.
Yeah, that's the wanting to have your cake and eat it too.
And they're getting it, but Daniel, they're getting it. It's not like you're not seeing the mainstream media cover that stuff.
And I would say the biggest challenge is in the rural areas is for law enforcement to rebuild their relationship with the community, which I work a lot with a ton of local law enforcement throughout a lot of counties that we do business in throughout the whole state of Georgia. It's difficult because they almost have to spend double the time just to gain, one person's trust back, and so I do a lot of these events with law enforcement to help bring the community and law enforcement back together, and we support that mission because we think it's important and we think it's valuable. But it's difficult when you've had these major players like you're talking about, the people that don't want to talk about reverting back now. They have caused so much damage. I mean, look at the training center that's being
training.
They're sending people from out of state in, bombing the place, doing all kinds of craziness. That to undo that kind of stuff and build the community's trust back is it takes a lot of hard work. So they're understaffed. So to do that and continue to do the job in the community, it's difficult. So.
But you said. I think the most fascinating thing you said was not urban communities. You said rural communities.
Yeah, well, because the budgets are smaller, right? When you get outside of metro, their budgets are not. They don't have the resources and the funding necessary.
But it just doesn't seem like that would be a big issue in rural communities, because that's kind of where I grew up in a rural community. And the relationship with the police officers seemed to be, at least when I was young, better. I mean, you don't have...
it's spread out, keep in mind, right? So, like, the counties that used to be, it's changing, right?
Yeah, sure. Definitely Metro Atlanta.
Forsyth County, Forsyth County is different, as you get out.
Now
Gainesville's
a suburb.
Right.
Which is nuts. So
Which is crazy,
I can
right.
see that a little bit. But is that your experience too, though, Ken?
I think and you correct me if I'm wrong, I think what he just clarified there, I think, is exactly what I was thinking. Now, you go all the way out to more traditional rural communities that are still traditionally rural communities and fit that definition in my head. Still, most of these places that I visit around state have good relationships with their law enforcement. There's a couple of isolated flyers where that's not the case. But it's because it's easier to maintain that relationship through difficult times or repair hiccups.
Just because of the belief systems that's already there.
Right, and because of the close relationships that those communities have, through familial relationships, friendly relationships, civic organizations, churches, same churches,
Yeah,
you know where I'm coming from. But where you see the city of Atlanta growing so quickly, and
to Daniel's point,
a lot of great business coming into Atlanta over the last 4 or 5 years in certain areas around Metro Atlanta and around the state of Georgia. We've seen a lot of growth, and that's a great thing. But we're also going to see a lot of some of the negative things that come along with that growth, and these more traditionally rural areas may be swallowed up by some of these metropolitan cities.
No doubt. I mean, back to your original point with Gainesville being suburban Atlanta nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, some of these counties that we do business in, I mean, we've watched it change over the last 18 years, and it's like, they're saying, "Oh, my jails are overcrowded." Well, it's like, well, you just added how many people to the population?
Yeah.
And, I mean, look. It's going to happen. Like crime exists. It's going to happen. And when you add 100,000 more people into the county, what do you think? No, do you think the arrest numbers were going to go down?
No, that's not the way it works.
It's just unrealistic expectations, I think, more than anything. And they pump money into some of these programs that don't work, right? So if all the funding's going into programs that are not being rolled out effective, well then. That's what you get.
Talking to GBI Gang Task Force Special Agent in Charge Ken Howard. Can we go back to the Atlanta Training Center? Because I'm glad you brought that up. It was crazy to see the things that were happening around the Atlanta Training Center. And Daniel's right. There are people. Most of the people arrested weren't even from here. It almost looks like organized. I don't say organized crime, but organized protesting that eventually turned into crime.
That's a fact. That's absolutely organized criminal activity, and they are absolutely bussing and flying people in from all over the country. Now, I know that the Attorney General's office, Chris Carr's office, has taken on some of that prosecution, and I think they're looking at it from that angle from what I've seen. I'm not sharing any inside baseball there. Some of that's been in the media, and that's a good thing because I know from my own experiences, not speaking about that particular investigation, but there's a lot of similarities. I'll take you back to the riots during the
Summer of Love.
Summer of Love.
2020, yeah.
I spent 14 or 15 straight days with a bunch of other agents on the streets in an undercover capacity, providing intelligence to command posts about what the activity was on the streets, and all we saw was a large majority. Yes, we saw a lot of our criminal street gang members taking advantage of the opportunity of the chaos, but we also saw a lot of out-of-state license plates. We also encountered a lot of people from out of state who were obviously not Georgia residents, and they were very organized. They were running around in vans with cases and cases of water to rehydrate protesters. And I say protesters, I'm talking about people who are burning businesses, who are throwing rocks at police and flipping cars. They're bringing them food. They're keeping them supplied and keeping them well heeled so that they can continue to engage in the criminal activities.
Which seems absurd and out of hand, and nobody could believe that would be real. And yet we know that it is, and it never gets reported in the mainstream media like that. Who's financing that? I mean, is this something that is gang level? Is it something that is way past that's in the political spectrum? I would imagine it's probably a little bit of both.
Yeah, that's going to be when you're talking about the Atlanta Public Safety Training Center and the type of crime that's going on out there, and similar to the stuff that was going on during the Summer of Love. That's not going to be gangs. That's not going to be criminal street gangs. That's going to be more on the political side of the house. That's going to be more people who are out to people who don't believe in the American dream. Sure. It's the folks who want to undermine the Constitution, and unfortunately, there's some wealthy people in this country that have certainly capitalized and taken advantage of the American dream themselves, but for some reason they're dead set on undermining the Constitution and that dream for others.
But that's the thing, though. It seemed, because you said, you're right, maybe it wasn't street gangs that were putting it on, but they were certainly a part of it. They're certainly engaged. Is there a crossover there at all?
Very rarely, no.
Okay.
What I saw during the BLM riots, Summer of Love riots, it was an interesting mix of society for sure. There were a number of people out there who I'm sure are true believers that believed in whatever cause, no matter how.
I think that's a very small number, though, right?
Yes, it was a very small number. They were there. There were those that were there. They're just misled.
Yep.
Not educated. Haven't taken it on to educate themselves about what the real issues are, whatever you want to call it. Small number. What happens is when you allow that type of chaos, and then you've got the people they're pumping in to support that small number that we just talked about. As decision makers, when we allow that type of chaos that starts taking root. Now, I'm not talking about constitutionally protected.
No, of course. Well, I think we're all in favor of that. Yeah.
I am certainly in favor. I raised my hand, and I have done it, and I'll do it again, to stand on street corners and provide security for those people who are doing it legally. But when we allow them to do it illegally, when we allow them to start destroying property, hurting people, don't forget the thousands of police officers who were injured during the Summer of Love nationwide, the ones who were killed, the civilians who died in those protests. When we allow that to happen, the criminal street gangs, they surge into the chaos. It's just an opportunity for them. They don't believe in any of that stuff.
Right.
They believe in green. They believe in U.S. dollars.
That's right, because that sets them apart. That gives them the opportunity to
hide in plain sight.
That's exactly right, man.
Hide in plain
just
sight.
Just blend in. Have you ever had to rescue someone that you, Daniel, know is somebody that you just could not agree with? You wouldn't agree with them whatsoever, but because it's the right thing to do, you still have to give bond for somebody that you just don't. I would find myself in a catch-22 right there.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have always for almost 20 years that I've been around this stuff, I've always tried to keep it fair and balanced, no matter what, right? Like that's the approach you have to have, no matter which side of the aisle you come from, what all walks of life. But yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, because people come in with this ideology because you really get to know some of these people when they come through, right? Mm-hmm. So we're working with these people throughout the entire duration of the case. It could be 2 years, 3 years. So yeah, you get to learn a lot, and yes, rescue or however you want to call it.
I mean, that's what for me it sounds like a rescue.
But yeah,
you know
and
what
I think it's informative too. A lot of people may come in with one viewpoint and then they leave with another because they're like, oh my God, we didn't realize, we've been told it was this, that, and the next, and really you're telling us it's this, right?
Yeah, right.
So,
and just being able to learn a little bit.
For sure.
I don't know how you do what you do sometimes, because I don't know that I would be of clear mind. I don't know that I would be able to separate. Like, I know you deserve this opportunity to defend yourself or what, because I'll be like, I know what you've been doing and I want no part of it. You know what I mean?
And our biggest, for me, I can't speak for the whole industry because everybody's got different ideas and ways of doing things. But also for me, it's also to have accountability, right, for your actions, whether you did or didn't do it, but also for law enforcement, because I do have such a tremendous amount of respect for law enforcement. Look, they're out there working these cases. The last thing we want to ensure these people show up for court and handle their business, and otherwise these cases don't move anywhere, right? So that's another big part of what we do, is ensuring these people's appearance in court.
Back Your Blue is the show that you're listening to. Our guest, GBI Gang Task Force Special Agent in Charge, Ken Howard. He's done so much, and we're going to get into some more of that, how he became an expert in many of the law enforcement disciplines, including gangs and organized crime here in the state of Georgia. We'll continue the conversation next on Extra 106.3.
This morning in North Carolina, wheels are spinning. Determination is winning. A passion is now a thriving business, and it shows no signs of slowing down. How? The power of a conversation, like the one Clint Spiegel had with First Horizon Bank about starting a bike wheel manufacturing facility in Asheville. Now it's not just talk, it's rubber meets road. First Horizon Bank. Let's find a way. Go to firsthorizon.com/Clint. First Horizon Bank, member FDIC.
Are you planning a fall wedding? With a venue to book, cakes to taste, and decorations to pick, the expenses can stack up. This month, D. Geller & Son is taking one expense off your plate: the rings. How? For the month of August, D. Geller & Son is offering 0% APR financing for 5 years. Find the perfect match to her engagement ring or dream up something totally one of a kind. Surprise her with something that will take her breath away on your wedding day. And just the same, get 60 months to pay with no interest. Only at D. Geller & Son in Atlanta, Kennesaw, and Sandy Springs, and online at dgeller.com.
Extra 106.3 and a second chance bail bonds are here to back your blue. Now back to the show on Atlanta's only conservative news and talk station, Extra 106.3.
Welcome back to Back Your Blue with Daniel Madelon of a Second Chance Bail Bonds and a Second Chance Monitoring. My name is Tug Coward. Our guest, GBI Gang Task Force Special Agent in Charge, Ken Howard. Let's start where the southern border is, because that has become such a political topic, especially as we head into the election in November, it being the number one or number two most concerning to most Americans. But folks here in Georgia probably got a lot of reason to be concerned about it too.
Hey, they certainly do. It should be a number one concern for Americans and for folks here in the state of Georgia, and here's why. And I don't understand why it's a political hot button. I don't know why there's so much disagreement on, between two different groups of politicians or people. But the number one responsibility, in my opinion, of the federal government is to protect its citizens from external threats. Then focus on internal. And if you don't focus on the external threats, you're going to have a problem with the internal responsibilities.
They build on one another.
Yeah, and so, I know from reading and reviewing the data, I know from speaking with my peers who are in law enforcement all along the southern border, that there's an estimated, this is a conservative lowball number, of 10 million plus illegals that have crossed that border in the last 3 years. That's a conservative number. I know that number is much higher, but I am confident in that number for the reasons I just told you. Yes. And so it goes to a lot of what we've been talking about, that there are going to be a tremendous amount of criminals, criminal street gangs, criminal street gang members. We already know they're taking advantage of this. They're infiltrating, hiding in plain sight, infiltrating into our country themselves, or they're the ones responsible for ferrying or escorting a lot of these people across the borders.
It's become a cottage industry.
It's a multi-billion-dollar industry for our cartels and our criminal street gangs. They're taking advantage of the women. They're taking advantage of the children. It is a human disaster area. And so anybody that cares about people, I don't understand why that's such a problem for us to shore up that border, because I know my law enforcement peers out there can do it. They've done it before. And so we know it can be done, and that's frustrating. And then we know that, of course, all of us who lived through September 11th, 2001 have a very healthy fear of what could come next based on that description that I just provided about what's going on at our southern borders. There's no doubt that our next actors are already in the country and that they crossed at that border.
Well, the federal government's already said as much. They keep throwing out the whole, well, just be prepared in case something happens. I feel like that, I don't know about y'all, but I feel like that is a CYA. That way when it happens, they can say, well, see, we already told you. We told you that, we feel like that, and you're seeing that from like the FBI level, the federal level, where they're saying be prepared. And if they're saying that, that makes me feel like that it's an extreme likelihood that something could or would or will happen, in the next little bit. I mean, I can't narrow it to 6 months or 3 months or a year, but if it's on their radar to the point where they're telling you about it,
right?
I feel like there's
the
something.
Last ones to
it's
know.
Exactly right. And look, you can tell me, Ken, if you feel the same way, or am I jumping to conclusions there?
No, you should fear that. You should, and I'm not telling you or your listeners, to go hide in your homes or your emergency shelters, but you should have a healthy respect for the lack of security and discipline on those southern borders. It's going to lead to events here in the U.S. All law enforcement will tell you the same. It's not if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. And, so anytime I'm taking my own family, I have two beautiful teenage boys and my wife. Anytime we're going out around Metro Atlanta where I know there's going to be large crowds, sporting events, concerts, whatever, my head's on a swivel.
Always.
I anticipate it before I go there so that I've got a plan. Discuss it with my boys. Say, hey, guys, where are the exits? What are you going to do? We have a general family plan for when it does happen, because it's not if, it's when.
No, that's exactly right. When you see what's happening here in Georgia with with gangs specifically, how do you teach your own kids? What should parents be teaching their kids to keep them away from that? Is it a matter of moving to a safer place in the area? What if you can't? I mean, there's all kinds of obstacles I think people will run into. What should parents be doing?
Yep. Well, you talked about what parents should be doing in a perfect world earlier in our conversation. By being married, staying married, displaying a healthy adult relationship in the presence of your kids, and walking in a faith-based lifestyle, not just talking about it. You're mirroring it to them. They're learning through what they see. And in the case of the young boys, they need strong male leadership. They need discipline. Young boys need discipline. That's why football
used to be a great word. Then it became a cuss word.
That's right.
Discipline.
That's right. But that's why football's one of the great teachers for a lot of young men, and that's why football is king in the South, and we love it so much, because so many great lessons are meted out at the practices and the games. It's one of the last true merit-based disciplines in our world.
That's right.
Where the game don't lie. Mm-hmm. And you're going to get on the field because you earned it, not because of any other reason. So discipline for sure. Other than that, you've got to keep boys active in positive environments. And we talked. You mentioned earlier you tiptoed. I don't know you were tiptoeing, but you hit around the topic of there's certain programs out there that are great for boys, but we also dump a lot of money into programs that aren't working. So let's be smart about cutting those programs and moving that money to the programs that are working, and keep those boys engaged in positive activities. That's a couple of things you can do.
What about, as we get ready to close up here, what do folks need to know here in Georgia about gangs? Because we all know it exists, but it's one of those unspokens, right? It just doesn't get a lot of coverage, at least in depth. It'll get the headline at night, we expect this is gang activity, and then there's nothing else said about it. What do people in Georgia need to know about what's happening?
Well, first of all, we don't have to run and hide. It's not Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome to date
Tina
myself
Turner's
a
not
little
singing.
bit. Yeah, it's not there. We have a relatively safe state. We're doing a good job. We're moving in the right direction through Governor Kemp's leadership and through Attorney General Carr's leadership, and really getting after the fight against these gangs. It's got the GBI and other law enforcement agencies engaged and pointed in the right direction. So we're working hard in a lot of arenas. Don't go hide in the basement. But when you do go out, just be aware in your own communities. Educate yourself on where the gangs are, who the gangs are, so that you can keep yourself safe when you're out with your family.
Where do folks educate themselves?
Well, you can reach out to the GBI, and I would be more than happy to provide you with current data, statewide, local data that would give you that information. I'd be glad to tell you what I know off the top of my head, or put you in touch with your local community law enforcement agents who have that information. So start local, talk to your local partners. If you're not comfortable there, talk to me. I'll get you what you need. Online, a lot of what we're talking about is it's not hidden. You can find it online. You can find out who the gangs are. You can find out. I encourage teachers and coaches all the time, follow your students on social media. They'll tell you. You'll see it right there, and don't ignore it. When those boys are acting out and you're seeing those indicators, confront them immediately and aggressively.
What is the GBI's website for folks right as we close?
GBI, I think it's a GBA at gbi.gov.
Mm-hmm. That sounds right. I figured so, but
yeah.
I didn't want to throw it out there because I was afraid I'd be wrong.
Well, Nelly, I appreciate you throwing me under the bus.
Well, no,
Nelly
I thought
Miles
for sure
is
you
gonna-
would have it.
Yeah. Now he's going to call. Nelly will be calling him.
That's exactly right. No, you know what? We'll restate that. GBI.gov is where you should go if you need anything from the GBI, and especially GBI Gang Task Force Special Agent in Charge Ken Howard. Thank you so much for your time, man. I feel like we could go on and talk for another 2 hours.
Yeah, we could.
And we would love to have you back and hopefully establish even more about what's happening in our state, good and bad. So thank you so much, man. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
This is Back Your Blue on Extra 106.3.
This is an Extra 106.3 podcast. To hear more live and local content like this, tune into 106.3 FM or download the Extra 106.3 app.
Are you planning a fall wedding? With a venue to book, cakes to taste, and decorations to pick, the expenses can stack up. This month, D. Geller & Son is taking one expense off your plate: the rings. How? For the month of August, D. Geller & Son is offering 0% APR financing for 5 years. Find the perfect match to her engagement ring, or dream up something totally one of a kind. Surprise her with something that will take her breath away on your wedding day. And just the same, get 60 months to pay with no interest. Only at D. Geller & Son in Atlanta, Kennesaw, and Sandy Springs, and online at dgeller.com.
A lifetime of hard work, children laughing in the kitchen, family photos on a restaurant wall, a legacy that lives on. It all comes from the power of a conversation, like the one Tommy Hall had with First Horizon Bank about taking over his father's Charleston-based restaurant business. Now the table is set for a whole new generation. First Horizon Bank. Let's find a way. Go to firsthorizon.com/Tommy. First Horizon Bank, member FDIC.
Hi, I'm Mark Beckham with Atlanta Ramjack. We specialize in only foundation repair. What is foundation repair? Foundations sink or settle. These issues need to be addressed. It only becomes more costly the longer you put it off. What is the biggest cause of foundation problem? Either poor construction, inferior site preparation, or weather. Drought causes cracks in your foundations. If you see any signs of foundation issues, please contact us at atlantaramjack.com.